called Izisho Zaga, directly translated to sayings and idioms. It's an innovative exhibition that explores the intricate relationships between traditional art, culture, and language. This project showcases the richness and complexity of African proverbs and idioms, highlighting their significance in imparting wisdom, offering consolation, and navigating difficult social situations. Izisho Zaga invites visitors to embark on a journey of discovery, revealing the multifaceted nature of traditional art. We're chatting about this with Khwezi Gule, Chief Curator at the Johannesburg Art Gallery. Khwezi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good morning and welcome to On the Move.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
Izisho Zaga, that's actually quite interesting because we have a lot of sayings and idioms on the African continent. And because we are so multifaceted, we have so many cultures, so many traditions, so many languages on the African continent. Each and every one of those have their own unique sayings and idioms. So I'm sure there's a richness in history and in language that you can take in this particular curation.
Yes, so the idea was that a lot of the work that has been done around what we call Southern African traditional collections, sometimes it's called the ethnographic collections in various museums, has been produced, the scholarship has been produced by people who don't necessarily speak the languages of the communities where these objects come from. Mm-hmm. So you will find that there's a lot of detail about what the objects are made from and where they originate and what the uses in everyday situations are. But what is often missing is the linguistic part of how these objects feature in poetry, in music, and other cultural elements of language, including proverbs. So proverbs are a way actually of accessing other ways of looking at certain objects, not just their functional significance, but their cultural and sometimes also religious significance.
One of the most well-known proverbs here in South Africa, umuntu ngubuntu, ngumuntu ngabantu, meaning, I am because you are, highlighting our greatness of Ubuntu, which is what we call humanity. That's just one, but there's so many in every language, and I'm sure some that are so untapped into. But how do you mix the two? How do you bring together the richness of our languages on the continent through visual arts?
Okay, so let me give you just one example. So, for instance, in isiZulu, you have a saying that ingane engakhali ifela embelekweni.
Yes.
Which also has a Sesotho equivalent, which is ngwania sa ling ushwela taring. So Sotho is not my language. So, but at least I hope I didn't butcher that too much.
I don't think so.
In any case, it's the same. It's the same words referring to the same object, but just in different languages. So, for instance, what I want to do is to bring out these aspects of culture, like what is imbeleko, for instance. But also, interestingly, in isiZulu, imbeleko doesn't only refer to the thing that mothers carry babies with, but it also refers to the ritual of imbeleko, which is a isiko that is done for infants when they are being basically introduced to the ancestors.
Yeah.
So the significance now of this object suddenly goes beyond just the object itself and its day-to-day function. It goes into language. It goes into rituals. So you find that there's a whole web of meaning surrounding these objects, which we often just look at and say, oh, that's a very nice like a cultural object, but we don't often think much beyond what we are seeing.
You know, just recently, this week, in fact, on one of our features here on the show, we're speaking about African languages, but we were also speaking about almost like the losing of Africa's written languages, if there were any, you know, historical written languages, because we know that our verbal languages were passed on from generation to generation, but it takes time for us to really understand the written language of a continent. It's important to show that we are literary rich in literature here on the African continent through any means necessary to keep that history alive. Is this something that is part of this particular exhibition, bringing through the richness of our languages, the richness of our cultures, especially the richness of our literature through these different mediums of art?
Well, yes, there is a component of this exhibition that deals with language in general and literature in particular. But it also deals with history. So, for instance, there's a saying in Izisho which says, "Ungumela umuntu kwayekatiki." Now, what is utiki? Okay, so the meaning is the saying itself is speaks to if you are sort of putting a threat to somebody or an ultimatum. So that's what it means. But what is utigi? Utigi is a British coin called a tiki, which we don't use these days because obviously we use rands and cents.
Yeah.
But in the old days, when South Africa was still a British colony, they used to use British money, and one of those coins was utigi, which was the lowest denomination in the coins. So what it tells you also now is embedded in that saying is not just the pre-colonial sayings and idioms, but also the fact that idioms change over time and incorporate some of the elements of whatever is political situations are going on. So so there is a kind of a historical element to it as well. But also interesting for me is that if you dig deeper into some of the objects, so for instance, some of the Tsonga type of beaded work also incorporate in them coins. So the question is, why do people then introduce into their traditional attire these kind of modern elements? And this happens in various ways, not just in the sense of the actual materials, but also the different types of things that then become new uses for objects. So the kind of historical element is quite an important one as well, because again, as I said earlier, when you look at beadwork, you think only about the beauty of the beadwork and how nice it looks on you, but you don't really think too much about the historical significance of these objects and how they've evolved over time.
That's quite interesting. I've never really thought of our traditional attires like that, and comes to think that if you actually look at the history of traditional attire on the African continent, you can actually tell the different influences and actually be a part of history through the art of those attires, and actually tell what happened during those time and who influenced us during those particular times. So that's quite interesting. We're still speaking to Khwezi Gule, Chief Curator at the Johannesburg Art Gallery. We're going to take a short break and continue speaking about the launch of this new exhibition titled Izisho ne Zaga, Sayings and Idioms.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole?
Well, in that case,
let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Get set and be ready to go.
On the Move with Palesa Tau and Benjamin Moshatama.
21 minutes past 9 o'clock Central African time. You're listening to On the Move with myself, Benjamin Moshatama and Palesa Tau. Today, we're speaking on this powerful conversation around, when you think about our cultural elements here on the African continent, at times we just resort to thinking of them as just an aesthetic. It has no real deep meaning, and even the meanings themselves of our cultural languages, our artistic preferences, and also our historical cultural definitions, at times we don't really investigate them and we lose their meanings. To actually, pin this together back to life again is this particular Izisho Zaga exhibition that's taking place at the Johannesburg Art Gallery here in South Africa. Khwezi Gule is joining us, Chief Curator at the Johannesburg Art Gallery. I mean, those meanings are probably very much ones that need that investigation you've been talking about, Khwezi. In terms of putting together something that at times can feel philosophical, at times they can feel more historical, how do you bring that to the present and also solidify it through these objects that you're putting out there? Because I feel like it's an investigation in itself.
Yes, so one of the things that we're planning to do with the exhibition is to include in the display some QR codes, which would then, for instance, be able to give you translations of the sayings that you will be seeing, but also to solicit people to contribute to our own knowledge in terms of, say, for instance, somebody who speaks Sepedi or somebody who speaks Chivenda can say, oh, I recognize this object, even if it's not from my own culture, but in our own culture, we use it like this, or this is the sayings that come from our culture that relate to this object, or something similar. So we are hoping that there will be participation by the people who visit the exhibition.
Did you see that as an interesting feature as well? The fact that we've borrowed each other's items, we've borrowed some practices, and at times there is no one way of actually defining an item, an idiom, or even a meaning.
I think we see. This is why I think our history is so fascinating, because, for instance, again, there's a saying in isiZulu which says "Amathanga ahlanzela abangena mapoto," which basically means that opportunities often come to those who cannot take advantage of them. Now, I remember some time ago I was talking to this about this to my friend who is Shona, and he said, no, in Shona there is a saying that says exactly the same thing, but obviously in Shona. So for me, what is fascinating then is, how is it that these cultures, which are so far apart in terms of distance, and also just in terms of, if a person speaks Shona, they will not necessarily be understood by a Zulu speaker and vice versa.
Sure.
But here we are having this saying, which means exactly the same thing. So this is why, for me, the historical element also becomes important, because for me, it's about how we also bridge gaps between cultures that we think are different, but in many instances we find are really quite similar.
Let's talk a little bit about this being housed at the Johannesburg Art Gallery. It's a contested environment. There are conversations around the Johannesburg Art Gallery and its state right now. And the space in itself has a historical relevance. It's right in the hub of our Johannesburg CBD. That area also has a lot of contentions in terms of its social context today. Why do you think that was a relevant space to actually house this exhibition?
Well, you will recall that, there was a time when Black people were not allowed into certain public spaces. And of course, even this collection that we are using, it only entered into the collection of the Johannesburg Art Gallery in the late 1980s. So the cultures of the of South Africa and in fact even other countries surrounding South Africa have been largely excluded from the institution. So part of what we are trying to do is to find new ways of articulating these cultures, but also to try and bring in people who have often felt excluded from these institutions. So as an example, my colleague Bamanye Ngale, he curated an exhibition called Inyathi Ibuzo Phambili, which basically means that wisdom is learned from those who are older. So the exhibition involves various forms of beadwork from various cultures within Southern Africa. Some of it Xhosa, some of it Tsonga, etc., etc. And so what we want to bring in people who know about these traditions and people who are not or often considered scholars in this type of work, in order for them to bring in the knowledge that we as museums don't have. So for us, it's very important to open up the conversation to people who have either been ignored or been discouraged from participating in this kind of discourse. And for us, it's part of the decolonial mission that we have set for ourselves. Because I think it's important for museums and galleries not to feel like these elitist spaces where only certain types of people can go and enjoy themselves, but a space for everyone that they can visit any time of the day and enjoy the offerings that we have in our collection.
Well, that's where we leave it. But let us know when the exhibition is happening and how people can be part of this experience.
Okay, so the exhibition will open on the 8th of June at 2 p.m. You can just come in and there will be some speeches, obviously, but also there will be some performances. Then we can also engage with the curators such as myself and the other curators here at the gallery. The entrance is free, so everybody is welcome. 8th of June at 2 p.m.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time there, Khwezi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's Khwezi Gule, Chief Curator at the Johannesburg Art Gallery.